Have you ever noticed how easy it is to spend hours planning your future, yet nothing in your life actually changes? You sit down with good intentions. You open a notebook, a document, a productivity app. You start mapping out your goals. You create timelines. You design strategies. You imagine the version of yourself who finally gets everything right. And in that moment, it feels amazing. You feel responsible. You feel productive. You feel like you're finally getting your life together. But then the day ends, and the next day begins exactly the same. The plan grows bigger. The ideas become more detailed. The vision becomes clearer in your mind. Yet in the real world, nothing has moved. No step taken, no risk faced, no real progress made. This is the trap almost no one talks about. Planning can become procrastination wearing a very convincing disguise. It feels like work. It looks like work. But deep down, it's something else entirely. Your brain loves planning. In fact, research in psychology shows that when you imagine achieving a goal or create detailed plans, your brain releases a small burst of dopamine, the same chemical linked to motivation and reward. In other words, your brain gives you a tiny reward just for thinking about success, not achieving it, just imagining it. So every time you plan the perfect strategy, outline your future, or research how to start, your brain quietly celebrates as if progress is already happening. But reality hasn't moved an inch. And that's where the danger begins, because planning creates the illusion of progress. It makes you feel busy while keeping you perfectly still. You tell yourself you're preparing. You tell yourself you're being smart. You tell yourself you'll start once everything is ready. But the truth is much harder to accept. Most people are not stuck because they lack knowledge. They are stuck because they keep preparing instead of acting. They wait for the perfect plan, the perfect timing, the perfect level of confidence, but perfection is a moving target. Every time you think you're ready, your mind finds another detail to refine, another strategy to improve, another video to watch, another step to figure out first, and suddenly weeks turn into months, months turn into years. Dreams that once felt exciting slowly become ideas you used to think about. Not because you weren't capable, but because planning became a comfortable hiding place. A place where failure cannot touch you. A place where judgment cannot reach you. A place where your idea stays perfect because it never meets reality. But here's something powerful you need to understand. Confidence does not come from planning. Confidence comes from proof, and proof only appears when you take action. Every small action sends a signal to your brain that says, "I can handle this." But when action never comes, the brain receives a different message. This must be too difficult. This must be dangerous. Maybe I'm not ready. And slowly, the dream begins to feel heavier than it really is. But what if the problem was never your ability? What if the real obstacle has been the thing that feels the safest, planning? Because the people who change their lives rarely start with perfect strategies. They start before they feel ready. And once you understand why your mind prefers planning over action, you'll see the trap for what it really is. And the moment you begin to see that trap, something uncomfortable starts to appear. A quiet realization that the real battle was never outside of you. It has always been inside your mind. Your brain was never designed to chase big dreams. It was designed to keep you safe. Thousands of years ago, survival depended on avoiding risk. If something looked uncertain, the safest move was to step back. Stay cautious. Preserve energy. Protect yourself from danger. That ancient survival system still lives inside you today. It doesn't understand business ideas, creative ambitions, personal growth, or bold life changes. All it understands is safety versus uncertainty. And uncertainty looks dangerous to the brain. Starting something new is uncertainty. Taking a risk is uncertainty. Putting your work out into the world is uncertainty. So your brain does something subtle. It gently redirects you away from action and towards safer behaviors. Behaviors that feel productive but don't expose you to risk. Researching more, watching another tutorial, reading another book, creating another plan. Your mind tells you that you are being responsible, that you are gathering information, that you are simply preparing for the right moment. But deep down, something else is happening. You are staying busy without facing the real challenge. Psychologists call this productive procrastination. It's one of the most powerful mental tricks your brain can play. You feel active. You feel focused. You feel like you're working towards something meaningful, but the real work has not started yet. Think about how often this happens. You want to start exercising, so you spend hours researching the perfect workout routine. You want to start a business, so you watch dozens of videos about entrepreneurship. You want to create something meaningful, but you keep studying how others did it. And each time you do this, you feel a temporary sense of progress, but nothing actually changes in your life. Because learning without action creates comfort, not transformation. Your brain prefers this comfort. It protects your identity from potential failure. Starting something important carries a hidden emotional risk. What if you try and it doesn't work? What if you discover that you're not as skilled as you hoped? What if others judge you? The mind fears those questions, so it protects you by keeping your potential theoretical. As long as the idea lives in your head, it remains perfect, untouched, unlimited. You can imagine success without ever confronting the possibility of struggle. But that protection has a price, because the same shield that protects your ego also blocks your growth. Every skill you admire in someone else was built through uncomfortable action. Every confident person you respect once stood exactly where you are now, uncertain and unsure. They didn't eliminate fear before starting. They simply moved before their brain could talk them out of it. And something powerful happens when you do that. When you take action despite hesitation, your brain begins to change. What once looked like danger slowly becomes familiar territory. The thing that once felt intimidating becomes manageable. But that shift can only happen after movement begins. Your brain will always suggest delay. That voice will always whisper that you need more time, more knowledge, more preparation. And if you listen to that voice forever, life will quietly pass while you prepare for a moment that never arrives. But the people who transform their lives learn to recognize that voice for what it is. Not wisdom, just fear trying to sound logical. And once you recognize that voice, you start noticing something else. Preparation has a strange comfort to it. It makes you feel responsible. It makes you feel disciplined. It makes you feel like you are doing the smart thing. The world even praises it. People admire those who plan carefully, who think things through, who study every possible angle before making a move. On the surface, preparation looks like wisdom. But there is a quiet line where preparation stops being helpful and starts becoming a hiding place. And most people cross that line without realizing it. Because preparation gives you control. When you plan, everything happens inside your mind. You decide the timeline, you imagine the outcomes, you design the strategy. Nothing unexpected interrupts the picture. Inside your mind, everything works perfectly. But the real world doesn't operate that way. Reality introduces chaos. Things move slower than expected. Obstacles appear from nowhere. Plans collide with circumstances you never predicted. And the mind doesn't like that loss of control, so it keeps you inside preparation just a little longer. One more adjustment to the plan. One more improvement to the system. One more round of research. You tell yourself you're getting closer to being ready. But readiness is slowly becoming an endless loop, because the truth is uncomfortable. The moment you step into real action, the illusion of control disappears. Your idea meets reality. And reality always responds differently than expected. Many people interpret that moment as failure, but it's not failure. It's feedback. It's the first real information you've received. Psychologists have discovered something fascinating about how progress actually works. Clarity rarely appears before action. Clarity is created by action. Most people believe they must fully understand the path before they begin. But the path only becomes visible once you start walking. When you move, you collect information. You see what works and what doesn't. You discover obstacles you couldn't have predicted. You find shortcuts that planning could never reveal. Every step teaches you something real. Preparation gives you theories. Action gives you truth. And truth moves you forward much faster. This is why so many successful people appear fearless. It's not because they always knew what they were doing. It's because they accepted that uncertainty is part of progress. They didn't wait until everything felt organized. They moved while things were still unclear. While others stayed in preparation, they entered the learning zone. The learning zone is uncomfortable. It's where mistakes happen. It's where confusion appears. It's where you realize that growth doesn't feel smooth or polished, but it's also where real capability is built. Every skill, every achievement, every transformation lives on the other side of that uncomfortable space. Preparation can only take you to the edge of it. Action is what pushes you through. And once you experience that shift, something powerful becomes clear. You don't need a perfect plan to move forward. You only need the courage to take the first imperfect step. Because the moment you step into action, the game changes. You stop imagining progress, and you start creating it. And when you finally step into action, something surprising happens. The fear that once felt overwhelming begins to shrink. Not because the situation became easier, but because your brain starts gathering a new kind of evidence. Evidence that you can handle discomfort. Evidence that uncertainty doesn't destroy you. Evidence that movement is possible, even when you don't feel ready. For so long, your mind has been waiting for confidence before taking action. But confidence was never meant to come first. Confidence is built afterward. It grows through experience, through repetition. Through small moments where you do something that once intimidated you and realize you survived it. This is one of the most powerful psychological shifts a person can experience. You stop waiting to feel ready and you start acting your way into readiness. The first step rarely feels strong. It feels awkward, uncertain, imperfect. Your first attempt might be slow. Your first effort might be messy. Your first result might be far from what you imagined. And that's exactly how progress begins. Perfection is not the starting point. Perfection is the byproduct of repetition. Every person you admire once started with the same uncertainty you feel right now. The difference is not talent or luck. The difference is that they allowed themselves to begin before everything was figured out. They understood something many people never realize. Action creates momentum. Momentum is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. When you are standing still, every step feels heavy, doubt feels louder, fear feels stronger. The idea of starting grows larger and more intimidating. But the moment you move even slightly, something changes. Your brain adapts. The unfamiliar slowly becomes familiar. The uncomfortable slowly becomes manageable. What once felt impossible begins to feel like a challenge instead of a threat. Momentum turns effort into rhythm. One action leads to another. One small improvement leads to the next. And before you realize it, you are doing things that once lived only in your imagination. But none of that begins with a perfect strategy. It begins with imperfect action. Action that feels small. Action that feels incomplete. Action that might even feel embarrassing at first, yet every imperfect step carries a hidden advantage. It gives you real feedback. Planning cannot tell you what will actually work. Only action can reveal that. When you move, you start learning faster. You see where the real obstacles are. You discover what needs improvement. You adjust, refine, and evolve. Your path begins shaping itself with every attempt, and slowly something powerful begins happening inside you. Your identity starts shifting. You stop seeing yourself as someone who thinks about goals. You begin seeing yourself as someone who pursues them. That shift changes everything. Because once you become a person who takes action, hesitation loses its control over your life. Fear still appears, but it no longer stops you. Uncertainty still exists, but it no longer paralyzes you. You begin trusting something deeper than your plans. You begin trusting your ability to figure things out along the way. And that realization unlocks a level of freedom most people never experience. You no longer wait for perfect conditions. You create progress in imperfect ones. And when that shift finally happens inside you, life starts to look different. Not because the world suddenly became easier, but because you stopped waiting for permission to begin. For a long time, you may have believed that some moment would arrive. A moment where everything felt clear, where confidence showed up, where the plan finally looked perfect. But that moment rarely comes. Life does not reward the most prepared people. It rewards the people who step forward while others are still thinking. Every dream, every goal, every transformation begins with a single decision. A quiet decision that happens inside your mind. The decision to stop negotiating with fear. You have probably felt that internal negotiation many times. I'll start tomorrow. I'll do it when things calm down. I just need a little more time, and those thoughts feel reasonable. They sound logical, but slowly those small delays build a habit of waiting. Waiting becomes comfortable, waiting becomes familiar. Waiting becomes the default response whenever something meaningful feels difficult. But every day spent waiting carries a hidden cost. Time keeps moving. Opportunities appear and disappear. Energy rises and fades. Ideas that once felt exciting slowly lose their intensity. Not because they were impossible, but because they were never given a chance to breathe in the real world. Your life is shaped by the actions you take, not the plans you write. You could design the most brilliant strategy imaginable, but if it never leaves the page, it changes nothing. Meanwhile, someone else with less knowledge, less preparation, and less certainty decides to try. They take one step, then another. Their path isn't perfect. They make mistakes. They adjust. They learn, and slowly, those imperfect steps begin to build something real. Progress. This is the quiet truth behind every major success you've ever admired. It didn't begin with flawless planning. It began with movement. Someone decided to begin while things were still unclear, while confidence was still fragile, while the outcome was still uncertain. And that single decision separated possibility from reality, because action has a compounding effect. The step you take today builds experience. That experience builds confidence tomorrow. That confidence fuels even bigger actions later. Momentum begins quietly, almost invisibly at first, but over time it transforms everything. A year from now, two people can stand in completely different places even though they started with the same ideas. One kept preparing, the other started moving, one waited for certainty. The other learned through experience, and the distance between their lives grew wider with every passing day. The most powerful change you can make does not require a dramatic leap. It begins with something much smaller. A single action today: send the message, start the workout, write the first page, record the first video, build the first version. It will not feel perfect. But perfection was never the requirement. Movement was. And the moment you stop planning your future and start acting inside it, something incredible begins to happen. The life you once imagined slowly begins to take shape, one bold step at a time. And once you begin moving like that, something inside you starts to wake up. A quiet strength that was always there, but buried under hesitation, doubt, and endless preparation. You start realizing that the future you once imagined was never waiting at the end of a perfect plan. It was waiting on the other side of repeated action. Most people spend their lives standing at the edge of possibility. They look at the life they want, they think about it, they talk about it, they plan it. But they never cross the invisible line that separates intention from execution. That line is crossed the moment you decide that progress matters more than perfection. Because the truth is, the world does not belong to the people who think the most. It belongs to the people who move despite uncertainty. Every opportunity you see around you exists because someone chose to act while others hesitated. Every innovation, every success story, every transformation began when someone accepted that they didn't have all the answers and moved forward anyway. They didn't eliminate fear. They walked with it. And that is one of the most important realizations you can have. Fear does not disappear before action. Fear fades after action begins. When you wait for fear to vanish, you stay stuck. When you move while fear is present, you slowly train your mind to see that fear is not a signal to stop. It is simply a signal that you are stepping into something meaningful. This is where growth lives. Growth rarely feels comfortable. It rarely feels organized. Most of the time, growth feels like confusion, effort, and small adjustments that slowly lead somewhere better. But those small adjustments compound. One action today seems insignificant. One step tomorrow seems small. One improvement next week may barely be noticeable. Yet over time, those small movements stack on top of each other until something remarkable begins to form. Skill appears where there was once uncertainty. Confidence appears where hesitation used to live. Opportunities begin appearing in places you once believed were unreachable. Not because you suddenly became different overnight, but because consistent action reshaped who you are. Your identity evolves through what you repeatedly do. If you repeatedly plan, you become someone who prepares endlessly. If you repeatedly delay, hesitation becomes your pattern. But when you repeatedly act, even imperfectly, something powerful happens. You begin seeing yourself as a person who moves forward. That identity shift changes everything. Because when you see yourself as someone who acts, the question is no longer, what if I fail? The question becomes, what's the next step? And that mindset unlocks a completely different life. A life where ideas don't stay trapped inside your mind. A life where possibilities turn into experiments, and experiments turn into real results. So if there is something inside you that has been waiting for the right moment, understand this clearly. The right moment was never about perfect timing. It was about the decision to begin. Right now is enough. Right now is where progress begins. Right now is where hesitation ends and movement starts. And the moment you choose action over endless planning, you step into a path that most people only dream about but never dare to walk.